Cyril,
Spira,
Squirrel, Zero, Cereal.
latest book launch got after you. Can always ask him why the cover looks like this. And why is it named after you? Which is quite a generic kind of title. At first when it was given to me, I'm like, yeah, can, no problem again. So, but,
Thanks, Tom. Thanks.
as a publisher, it's actually selling quite well, so I'm actually quite happy. So if you like, there's a case, I will sell more books too. You can read from book. I don't know why he's going to read. Okay, oh yeah, okay, he memorized it, so yeah.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you for being here and for standing around. Can everyone hear me? Because I'm going to be just sitting here and comfortably and reciting my poetry. Okay. Just a very short. Please feel free to sit down. Just a very short pre-ramble, if you don't mind me. How do I begin actually? Okay. I think ever since I first started writing poetry, I've always been a little bit of a odd child because I mean love and death are like two of the biggest things in my life. The biggest themes that have gripped my imagination since I first started writing my first poem. And so this book, I guess, is inevitable that when I look for a topic for this book, I realized that I haven't actually devoted an entire book to my partner. And I write mostly confessional poems. Everything I write is from my own life. So I decided to write this book and dedicate it to my partner. Basically, the book is a book about love, impermanence, and about the act of writing and how writing is involved in the process of letting go. In any relationship, one person will outlive the other. And being the kind of morbid, skeptical person that I am, or not skeptical, pessimistic person that I am, I'm always anticipating the end of everything. That's the way I'm built. Ever since I was a little child, I was very morbid. I was always terrifying my parents. Like I can see the end of everything. You know, I'm anticipating how anything will complete. So this book is about me thinking about the future. How I'm in this relationship with this person who is somewhere in the shop if you can find him. He's hiding. And I'm anticipating what happens one day when one of us outlives the other. I'm younger, so he'll go first. Okay, so this poem's about that. So yes, have I said it? Yes. So in general, if you remember nothing else, the book is about love, impermanence, and about the act of writing. I think that's the most important part. It's about writing as well. It's not just love poems, it's not just poems about death. It's also poems about writing and how writing is involved in letting go, in coming to terms with impermanence. Yeah, so I'll be reading a sequence of 8 poems. They're all quite short. All the poems are the same length. So I'll just read the whole sequence once through, and then after that, if you have any questions for me, you can ask, okay? Okay. After you. After you. Our home is only as old as it is now, like your older body curved into mine. Furniture must snap and collapse. The ceiling could cave in like your skull long after you are in the ground. No one left but me to imagine it. In the years to come, all our belongings will vanish. And don't forget, so will I. First date. Sometimes, I rewrite what it was like when we first met. Not at City Hall during our lunch breaks from work, all deflective looks and refolding of arms. How about if we bump into each other at Hoppa Villa, amidst 10 levels of hell, our gazes bridging over spirit bodies of the hateful, happily boiled or peeled or knifed? Or how about on a train at the zoo during the night safari? We could trade earnest grins tucked in shadows alongside lions and rhinos. When I could venture a remark to you, what separates us from the animals is how I could get to know you past the point when you are no longer here. Last line. We wished when we were younger that we could retire in time. You could read your books on religion. I could retire and write poetry full time. How impossible in Singapore, although we hunt for time. You read during lunch breaks and late at night. I write when my boss isn't looking. In that real dream of our past, we had nothing but time. You watched your nature documentaries. I dreamt of poems lying in your lap. In the quickening dream of now, we turn away from the fringes of time. You read while stroking my neck. I slow your hand in my poem's last line. Writing exercise. This one is for the navel-gazing, masturbatory, cunt or cock-loving poets of heartache and the untouched flesh. Let us reach for each other across our poems. We know who we are, writing and rewriting to calm a private sea of lack. Reason alone cannot appease. So when our partners have left the room for tonight, how about if we penetrate ourselves on paper? So deeply we meet each other again. Not forgetting. In Iran, 2 boys are strung up for unlawful expressions of love. They could have been us. In Cameroon, a man is jailed for texting, "I'm very much in love with you," to another man. In Taiwan, 2 women are married in a temple by a Buddhist nun. Not forgetting how many risk all that they are to love, while those who do not care may simply fuck themselves. Bold. There's little we cannot accomplish without hearing our own voices. The music of not hearing voices. Not music, but an atmosphere of existence. In a corner of the room, a bowl of white yellow orchids, curved in a gesture of tenderness over its open mouth. Silence over original silence, which invites the hum of phenomena shoring up against the sigh of newspapers closing upon the wind's request. Analogies are falling back upon themselves, so nothing becomes divisible again. Neither we nor I left here to write this moment into memory. Traces of words are laddering into breath, which fills the living with no particular feeling and departs in no particular time. Possible scenarios. What if on that crucial day at the hospital, I'm told that only immediate family can see you. Blocked by foreign nurses, bored with my rage, as the doctor shuffles away embarrassed, and someone calls for security to escort the tragic younger lover out the building. I anticipate this as much as I anticipate the many of us standing transfixed like mouthless effigies of ourselves around your coffin at the wake. And what if suddenly things were vice versa? Would you threaten to sue while in the ICU I wait for your unspeakable goodbye? Anyway, if our bodies are empty metaphors, gesturing at souls indistinguishable from a limitless whole, if similes are really wishful thinking, looping back upon themselves to strangle vision, if words only invite more words to form pictures within pictures bound by a frame, if suddenly I stop talking and you can still tell anyway. Last one. Fire. Soon there'll be nothing of us left to shave. Our razors will burn to rust beside the sink. To write is already to mourn. That old fear is boiling here. My mind dances on coals. Dying alone is the worst thing. The fire is everywhere. We stand, touch, kiss. Nothing we ask for could be better than this. Thank you. Woo. So yes, that was.
Anybody have questions?
Does anyone have any questions for me? Don't wait, then just.
He's not gonna like my question. Because of
Yes. No.
Hi Cyril, thanks for that. Before, I happened to read the book already, and before I read it I was a bit wary, because as you said earlier, I thought maybe it had the potential to kind of be a bit morbid, but I was very pleasantly surprised that it was actually, I found it quite realistic and actually quite life-affirming. And I was wondering how you avoided the kind of self-pity that maybe can arise from this kind of premature grieving or mourning. Do you go through a lot of drafts, or what was your process like?
I think I've always said that poetry is, I write prose as well, but for me poetry is the way I think. I write poetry to keep myself sane. So I think that was inevitably part of the process. Emotions like self-pity, emotions like depression and suicidal tendencies, I've been through all that. And it was writing and writing poetry that helped me to basically find a kind of peaceful resolution within myself. So I think that's, the credit goes to the process of writing. And because I use poetry in such a way, I think it was inevitable that I would use the book form, the manuscript form, to kind of like get me through a kind of like a narrative arc internally to a point of like peace and serenity about the largest themes of impermanence and all that. Yeah. Any question? I'm pretty shameless, so I'll answer anything.
Yeah, I have a question. I was just telling Cyril a while ago that I'm not a very poetry person. But this is a poetry that is the kind of poetry I can, I guess, understand. And you began by saying that I'm quite negative, skeptical, and so on and so forth about love and death, and you always think of the end. So the 8 poems that you chose to read from, yeah, they all do speak about death, which is inevitable, which will come. But I don't see any skepticism in there.
Yeah. No, I think skepticism for me is the starting point. Yeah. It's just my inevitable nature. I remember this even when I was a young child. Every time I got too happy or when I got too complacent about something, I always had another voice inside me that said, that's not gonna last. And then what? And then that would actually plummet me into a deeper kind of like, sadness. But even then, within that sadness, there's another voice that would tell me, that's not gonna last either. So in a way, there was a part of me that was already, I guess, moving towards a kind of meditative stillness between the two extremes. And what helped me was poetry. Poetry helped me to basically find that middle way between these extremes of emotion. It wasn't easy. I think in many ways I used that kind of energies from both sides, the very, very happy, the very, very complacent, to the very, very sad and despairing and very angry, to kind of feel the poetry. But inevitably, because of the nature of the book form, I think this is something I want to stress. My books of poetry do tend to have a narrative arch, a kind of psychological journey. So it's not just individual poems that you can just take out and say that, okay, I like this poem, I like that poem. There's a way in which they're all connected to kind of like help me personally, in a very narcissistic way, to get to a point of stillness and acceptance about everything.
So then you wouldn't use the word skeptical to define poetry. It's like, I think you observed it, something affirmative about it. Particularly your second poem, I can't remember the name now, but then it concludes with this kind of continuity after death.
Yes.
Even though you're gone, you would remember the person in too many ways.
Yeah, you learn new things about the person. Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah.
there's something very positive and affirmative about it, rather than.
Yeah.
Am I right to say that? I'm not sure if that is the intent.
I mean,
in writing.
I would never say that, it feels a bit egotistical to say, I intended to be this way, so it became this way. It was never like that. I think the writing just carries me along,
Yeah.
and I let it carry me along, or else, for me, I really do believe that, the ego leads to suffering. That's my personal belief. I'm sure not everyone shares that. For some people, the ego is very life-affirming. For me, the ego leads to suffering. So I use poetry to basically take me away from, this whole center of like, I must feel sad, I must feel skeptical, I must feel angry about something, I must feel proud that I'm in control of my writing. I never allow it to happen. Or else I would just stop at 3-4 poems.
Yeah.
Yeah, but because I let it go, the poetry just takes me to a very, very new place, and all the poems just come. I think someone was asking me, how come the poems feel in a way effortless, like conversational and stuff like that? It's because it's exactly how it flows in my head, and I just basically map that onto the page itself. Yeah.
Interesting you say that, because I was reading as you were reciting, and then some of the arrangements of the words have now been changed. So although it got you to the page, then actually you're thinking something else already, right?
Actually, that's a very good point. I mean, someone asked me in a different way, is the poem ever fixed?
Yeah.
Right, on the page? And my answer is always no. Yeah, if I were to write any of my old books, rewrite them or re-edit them again, if I was given the creative freedom to edit my old work again, they will all be different books. So I never allow myself to do it, because I think each book is a record of a time and place within my life, and that was how I felt at the time, and I want to be true to that moment. But again, even with this book, with each poem, if I were to go back again, right, I might have a new idea, I'll just put it in. For me, there is no solid final form. Yeah, I mean, some other poets might think differently, so it's a controversial point. I don't want
But
to.
it's very interesting, isn't it? We teach poetry thinking that, okay, it's the word on the page, and when we teach it, this is the way it was written, this is what
I
was
think poetry is
intended.
taught very badly here.
That's besides the point, but
Yeah.
the whole idea is, what if he were to write, he or she were to write it again? Or she would say Keats were to write again, he might think about his life in a very different way. When he writes about suffering, doesn't he? I mean, I was thinking of Keats when you recited. He's so preoccupied with the idea of death. But probably we're all wrong in thinking that that's what he meant. He meant something totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even I don't know sometimes. Just let the writing, take it away basically.
I guess that's the natural part of the process of writing itself.
Yeah.
Like you should discover yourself somewhere else.
I mean, it's not a universal thing. I think every poet is different. I know many poets who don't think the same way as I do. The poem is the poem is the poem, that's it. After I'm done with it, that's it. Never again. It's perfect. It's like, not really for me. It's like, I will, if given a chance, I will add something else to it. Or 10 years down the road, I look at the poem again and I see on the page. If I have a chance, if the publisher give me a chance, I will write a different take on it. Or even change the title, even very banal things like that. And it won't bother me. That the thing is already in print.
Visualize a book saying Cyril revisited.
No,
and then you have a whole. No, it's possible because it's a continual process.
Yeah, I won't do it then.
Sorry,
Yes.
can I ask, firstly, does the theme of nothingness come into play in this book as well? And secondly, if you don't think there's a final end in the poem, then when are you okay to publish it?
A lot of it is, which is I think. Okay, there's a lot of questions actually. Okay, let me deal with the second one first, then I deal with the first one. Okay. The second one is, when do I know to publish it? I think what helps is the overall narrative structure of it. Okay, I'm using the word narrative very loosely. There's an implicit psychological journey in the book. So I use that structure to help me decide, okay, stop tweaking with this poem now and move on. You need to deal with some other aspect of this emotion now. And then I keep moving on. Then once I get the whole structure, I don't touch it anymore. I think it is the structure for me that helps me decide what should be left alone. But if you were to just take the poem out of the structure and go I'm going to rewrite this, 300 times, and I'll be okay with it, But because I want to do justice to the whole structure, I leave it alone. Now to the first part, I think nothingness, if you read the book, it is part of the narrative structure. It is, I don't give too much away, but it is implicit in the ending. Nothingness for me, as I define it, is the quality by which no intrinsic or absolute truth is possible. That's my definition. Some people call it emptiness, some people call it pure, utter potentiality, without judgment, without condemnation, without any kind of ideological category. It's just pure potential. Sometimes emptiness has a very negative connotation to it. So I call it nothingness to kind of neutralize it for myself. Although at the same time, if you are feeling bipolar, nothingness does sound like, slit my wrist, right? But it's not that. It's a kind of an open-endedness. And it is something that comes into play in this book in a very big way. Because if I were to meditate or reflect on this particular relationship that I'm dealing with, the open-endedness helps me to come to terms with its impermanence. Yes?
I noticed there's quite a lot of rhyme in the few poems that you read out. I'm wondering if you can comment on sort of the evolution of your writing maybe over time.
You see, that's the wonderful thing about poetry. When you talk about evolution of the writing of poetry, you're not talking about the evolution of me, or how I think, or how I basically frame the world at that point of time. So the rhyme really wasn't intentional, and it did occur to me that do I want this rhyme in this poem because is it cheesy? Is it corny? Then my first instinct is to go back to that one philosophy that I've always had from the beginning, which is that, was this moment true to me? I think once I keep going back to that emotion, once I keep going back to the fact that am I doing justice to this memory, to this thought, to this state of mind right now? It allows me to basically let go of the poem and go like, okay, so what if there's a rhyme? That's fine. I guess I would be more particular in the beginning. But I think now that after I've written so many books, I don't really care what people think anymore about whether I rhyme or not. You know, it's like, is it? Ignore him, he's Ah Beng. What does he mean? Ah Beng. Okay, anyway. But yeah, I hope that answers the question. I mean, the basic thrust is still there. I always, you know, as a confessional poet, I'm very obsessed with the truth of the moment. And I try not to worry too much about other things like, is it beautiful, or is it very beautiful or not, or is it, am I touching on sociological issues or not? It's like, I don't really care. I know it's odd to say this in Singapore, but I really don't care. Yeah. Yes?
Give me another poem.
Another poem, ah? What you want?
Whatever is your favorite poem from the collection.
I don't have a favorite, because... Does anyone else have any other questions? Yes, private sale. Okay, I'll just read one last poem, then I'll just end the reading, yeah? This is a... Well, did I mention I have no punctuation in this book? I don't know why. It just happened. Like I said, the worst question to ask me would be like, to ask me why I do the things I do. I just let it flow right through me. I feel more like a conduit than the writer, if that makes any sense.
Give all these literature lessons back to the teacher.
Yeah, I always give teachers a difficult time. Okay, so it's called Mind the Gap. This is my last poem, okay? Mind the Gap. Is the door open, so it's very disturbing to me. Mind the Gap. If in the end, thought hurries us down a veil of tears, then what am I doing thinking of you? On the MRT, on my way to you. 20 minutes in total, if nothing breaks down. After peeling one layer from another of limitless truth, beyond survival and twitching of dull velleities, what is left, I wonder, still married to the self, like a panting dog to its post. The train slows to the speed of my mind, slowing generously to a crawl and not a stop. Not a withdrawal, but the rapid widening of an aperture, however temporary. And premature, so the ride picks up again, vistas narrow to a pinhole view of where and what. I will be without you, the thought or winding analysis of it. When doors open, I sprint up the escalators to meet you. Alright. Thank you.